COVID jabs are approved for 12 to 15-year-olds. The UK's 4 nations are given the go-ahead to vaccinate children based on extremely powerful evidence, according to England's chief medical officer.
The disruption in education that has happened has been extraordinarily difficult for children and had a big impact on health, mental health and long-term public health.
Also tonight in the US, a crucial court hearing for an absent Prince Andrew over allegations of sexual assault 20 years ago. Shocking evidence, we reveal, that supposedly secure mobiles issued to prisoners to contact family during COVID have been hacked for drug trafficking. And
there she is. Hello there. Love that smile.
Fairy tale in New York, Emma Raducanu on how her US Open win helped her get one over on her parents.
Very hard to please, but yeah, I got them with this one. They couldn't resist.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. COVID vaccinations are recommended for all 12 to 15-year-olds. The UK's 4 chief medical officers announced today. They said there is extremely powerful evidence that the impact of missing education has had a big impact on pupils' well-being and mental health. They'll now be offered a single dose of the Pfizer vaccine, but it won't be compulsory. Now, that comes a week after scientists said vaccination couldn't be justified on health grounds alone. It'll now be up to ministers in each devolved nation exactly how they respond. Here's our political correspondent, Romilly Weeks.
And please remember also about the articles we've learned.
For the overwhelming majority of pupils, getting back into the classroom has been a huge relief. The effect of the pandemic on children's education and mental health, a prime driver in today's decision that COVID vaccines will, after all, be recommended for 12 to 15-year-olds across the UK.
Our view was the benefit exceeded the risk to a sufficient degree that we are recommending to our ministers in all 4 nations that they make a universal offer, and I want to stress the word offer, of vaccination to children 12 to 15.
The JCVI, the body that advises the government on vaccines, were keen to stress that despite their decision that on health grounds alone they wouldn't recommend jabs for this age group, they supported the chief medical officer's decision.
Today, the fact that the CMOs have done this assessment and this review is good news for everybody, because then the wider impacts of vaccination have been examined. And I want to stress that this by no means means that there is any conflict between the advice provided by JCVI and the advice and decision that's been provided by the CMOs.
At this school in Croydon, I spoke to pupils in Year 10, now in line for a vaccine.
How many of you will take a vaccine if it's offered?
I think it would be very beneficial for me, seeing as a lot of my family members have some sort of ongoing illness, which will be hard for them. If I ever got COVID, I won't be able to see them for a while.
The majority of my family have had it, and there's been no side effects. And I feel like as a family, because I'm quite a family-oriented person, we like to gatherings, and we've struggled a lot this and last year not seeing each other.
There were some yet to be convinced.
I feel like overall I'm leaning towards the side of getting it, but still I'm a bit shaky.
And what will convince you?
I really love my family, and I want them. I really want to keep them safe, and so I think that, and also scientists, just to back up the proof of it's going to be okay.
In the Wirral, these parents too had mixed views.
I don't think it's been tested enough.
If it's being offered, then we're going to take it.
I would basically leave it up to her to decide.
The government is expected now to move ahead with a single-dose vaccination programme in schools. After a confused start, their communication with children and parents will be crucial to its success. Romilly Weeks, ITV News.
Well, Health Editor Emily Morgan is here. Emily, in that report, sort of mixed reactions from parents. Do you think the government has quite a lot of work to do to convince people?
Yeah, I think they do, actually. On the face of it, it's quite confusing messaging, and it puts parents in a slightly difficult position, given that 10 days ago, the JCVI said that there was only marginal health benefits to vaccinating teenagers, and on health grounds alone, they wouldn't be recommending it. Now the chief medical officers have come out to say that once you take into account wider issues like education, then that tips the balance and means they will be recommending it. So I think parents will be confused tonight, and many may have already made their minds up. Now, I put this to the CMOs at the press conference this afternoon. They said that a marginal health benefit is still a benefit, and the disruption to education has such huge emotional and mental effects on children, which is why they are now recommending it. So that is the messaging that they are going to have to get across to parents very clearly tonight to convince them that it's worth vaccinating their children.
OK, Emily, thanks for that. Well, meanwhile, it's thought 1 in 3 people arriving to England and West and Northern Ireland from abroad this spring may have broken quarantine rules. Between mid-March and the end of May, anyone travelling from an amber list country should have spent 10 days at home. But new data suggests 300,000 cases were referred for further investigation amid concerns that that wasn't happening. French pharmaceutical company Valneva says the UK government has cancelled a deal to buy its COVID vaccine. The jab is still in trials, but allegations of a breach of the agreement mean that the contract will no longer be fulfilled. The firm denies the claims. Now, lawyers acting for Prince Andrew have filed papers indicating that they will challenge a civil case for sexual assault being brought against him in the United States. An attorney has been appointed for the case, part of which is being heard later today. Now, the Duke of York strongly denies allegations he sexually assaulted Virginia Roberts Giuffre when she was 17. Our royal editor Chris Shipp has the latest.
Since Virginia Giuffre announced she was suing Prince Andrew in August, there has been no word from the Prince nor his legal team. But clock, her lawyers will argue, should now be ticking. We learned last week that the papers were handed in at the gate of the Duke of York's official residence in Windsor. A police officer took them and said they would be passed to the lawyers. But tonight, court papers just filed show the Prince's US lawyer will contest the serving of papers.
It's a special appearance to say you didn't do your job right, plaintiff.
It just adds to the process of delay.
Prince Andrew's attorneys may now appeal it, and that's going to be a further delay. And the goal for the Prince as a defendant is to delay.
Prince Andrew will be in Balmoral when the court sits at 9 p.m. UK time tonight. He's staying with the Queen and even went out shooting on Friday. One of the 3 locations at which Virginia Giuffre claims she was sexually assaulted by the Prince was Jeffrey Epstein's New York mansion, where once the Duke was filmed waving at the door. Miss Giuffre's father said today that no one is above the law.
He needs to know what it's like to be held accountable for his actions. This is not the times of William Wallace, where the royals can just do whatever they want. You know, the times have changed. Prince Andrew thinks it's still those times, that he can do whatever he wants.
Prince Andrew has always denied the allegations and previously said he doesn't recall ever meeting Virginia Giuffre. Chris Shipp, ITV News.
Here, a revolutionary new blood test for cancer is to undergo the world's biggest trial in several areas across England. Now, the test can detect 50 types of the disease before symptoms appear. Trials are already underway in Runcorn in Cheshire, where patients have been invited to take part. Our North of England reporter Hannah Miller heard from those who were part of it.
A simple test that could save lives, as patients pop in to pop-up clinics where a small sample of blood could show the signs of cancer well before symptoms appear.
I was invited, along with my brother, to come, and well, I thought there was no problem. I've got plenty of time. It might help other people, and who knows, it might even help me.
The NHS is hoping that 140,000 people will take part in the trial. All those invited will be aged between 50 and 77. The test is designed to detect cancers that are difficult to identify early, like in the neck, lung, pancreas and bowel.
One of our long-term plan commitments was to try and move to getting 75%, so 3/4 of cancers detected at stage 1 and stage 2. And we're really hopeful that this will be an important contribution to achieving that goal.
But for some, today's announcement doesn't go far enough. Kelly Smith was just 31 when she died from bowel cancer after her chemotherapy was delayed due to COVID. Her family have been campaigning for better treatment and diagnosis ever since.
It's only a game changer if that testing is available to a wider group of people than those over 50. You know, we've seen so many people in the last 12 to 18 months, younger people dying of cancer because it's not been caught early enough.
The Gallery test looks for potential signs of cancer in a sample of blood.
The trial will assess just how effective the test is at identifying cancer early, the beginning of what could be a revolution for both patients and the NHS. Hannah Miller, ITV News, Runcorn. The Work and Pensions Secretary has been accused of adding insult to the injury of planned cuts to universal credit. In an ITV interview, Therese Coffey suggested that claimants who will be getting £20 less from next month should simply work an extra couple of hours. Well, our political reporter Shihab Khan is in Westminster. Shihab, quite a lot of people are quite angry about this, aren't they?
Yeah, we know that there are plenty of people around the country on universal credit. The latest figures suggest it's as high as £5.9 million. And what the government has said is that from next month, the £20 uplift that they introduced at the start of the pandemic will be going. Now, this morning on Good Morning Britain, Susanna Reid had the opportunity to raise a case of someone who says that their life will be much more difficult without it directly to the Work and Pensions Secretary. And the response she gave has elicited quite a response.
A single parent here of 2 children. Before the uplift was introduced, we were already on a knife edge. It was some relief. For that to be removed, it will leave us a big question again. Do I go hungry or do my kids go hungry? How are we leaving people in that situation?
But £20 is roughly about doing potentially an extra 2 hours work per week. In terms of the national living wage has been already increased.
Now, there are plenty of charities who have said that that's actually factually inaccurate and that it would take much more than 2 hours of work to get that back because of the way universal credit works. Labour have said exactly the same thing. They are going to be forcing a non-binding vote here in Westminster this week to give MPs their say, and they're far from happy about this.
Shihab Khan at Westminster, thank you. Still to come, the ITV Evening News.
My hall, you're talking 90% of the hall are taking some sort of drug.
A special report from inside the Scottish prison where drugs are rife. And how a gaffe by organisers forced thousands of marathon runners to go the extra mile. Those stories and more after the break. Join me then. Hello and welcome back. ITV News has learned that hundreds of mobile phones given to inmates in Scottish prisons may have been hacked to traffic drugs. The devices were supposed to be tamper-proof and were given to prisoners to help them stay in contact with family during lockdown. Our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith has a special report from inside the notorious Berlini jail in Glasgow.
Berlini, Scotland's biggest, oldest and toughest prison.
There's a lot of deaths in here through drugs, just fights, arguments. It's just a difficult place to be.
ITV News has gone behind these walls as part of our ongoing investigation into Scotland's drug death crisis.
In my hall, you're talking 90% of the hall are taking some sort of drug.
Scotland has the worst drug death record in Europe and one of the highest levels of incarceration.
We're in a hall in Berlin. It's one of 5 halls. We commonly hold between 1,200 and 1,300 prisoners, but we're only designed for 987. Overcrowding is a real issue for us.
What proportion of your prisoners here in Berlin are here because of or related to addiction to drugs?
It probably varied, probably about 80%.
Now prisoners have been handed a new way of getting drugs in. During the pandemic, 7,600 inmates in Scotland were issued with their very own mobile phone. The Scottish Government spent £3 million on the handsets to compensate for a lack of outside contact in lockdown. They were supposed to be tamper-proof. But ITV News has learned some of the phones were hacked almost immediately, enabling them to conduct smuggling operations from inside a prison cell. How many phones do you reckon have been tampered with since they were issued?
I done a check of the phones, probably in one of the halls here in March time, and of the 300 prisoners that were there, there was probably about 100 phones tampered with altogether.
Once these deals are done, drugs have simply been thrown over the prison walls or smuggled in. Given this decision on mobile phones was made by the Scottish Government, we put our findings to Scotland's First Minister.
Well, that should be getting dealt with by the prison authorities, and I'll certainly...
Well, your government just handed prisoners mobile phones that used to be contraband.
We didn't just hand them. Even prisoners in our prisons have human rights and the right to have visits and to keep contact with their families. So it was in the context of that not being possible that we created a different way for prisoners to have contact with their families, in some cases their children.
I guess the tamper-proof would have been really important. How much effort was put in to make sure they were tamper-proof?
As you would appreciate, I'm not going to answer that question because the prison authorities will have looked at it. If you want to give me evidence of phones being tampered with and that, I will absolutely look at that.
A statement from the Scottish Prison Service says they provide support, counselling and medical help for addictions, but those who continue to make money out of human misery will attempt to traffic drugs into our prisons. Meanwhile, this cycle of addiction, crime and incarceration keeps taking these men either back behind bars or to an early grave. Peter Smith, ITV News, Glasgow.
Quick look at other news now. Protesters caused major disruption by blocking several junctions on the M25 during this morning's rush hour. Climate activists from a group called Insulate Britain sat in front of vehicles at 5 junctions, with some cars stuck for 4 hours. Nearly 60 people have been arrested. Primark's revealed its sales were hit by the number of people who were pinged over the summer. The retailer's figures show a drop in high street shoppers because of the thousands told to self-isolate. And Andrew Neil has stepped down as chairman and lead presenter of GB News. The journalist was one of the key figures behind the channel's launch in June, but hasn't presented his daily show since the end of that month. Now, there were the first signs today of how tennis sensation Emma Raducanu is set to be a global superstar. As the 18-year-old took in some sightseeing in New York, she spotted a giant advert celebrating her US Open victory. And she also made a guest appearance on US breakfast shows where she revealed how her parents had given her the resilience she needed to win. Here's our sports editor, Steve Scott.
There she is. Hello there. Love that smile. We're so thrilled to be joined right now by Emma Raducanu.
A small taste of a new and very different lifestyle. On America's breakfast shows, Emma Raducanu spoke about everything from how she'd spent her winnings to her parents, who've helped turn a supreme talent into a Grand Slam champion.
Yeah, they were pretty tough on me when I was young, but it kind of shaped the way, and I think now it's helping on the biggest stages in the world, on Arthur Ashe Stadium, when you really need it. They were just so happy and proud of me, and they're my toughest critics and very, very hard to please, but yeah, I got them with this one. They couldn't resist.
Saturday's astonishing success brings dollars, many millions of them, but also enormous expectation. Pressure she'll need protecting from.
While the challenge for Raducanu's team is to manage her future, a future that looks very different to the one they'd mapped out just a few weeks ago, the priority for those who run the game here is to maximise the potential that her stunning rise to Grand Slam champion has gifted them.
Raducanu appeals to a young demographic and has a girl-next-door relatability about her.
I did play quite a bit, but it's making me want to play tennis a lot more. She was amazing, and I can't believe that she won the whole thing.
The Lawn Tennis Association knows it simply can't miss out on this chance to grow the game.
And actually over the last 2 years, we've been seeing participation grow at each different level. And that's something that we hope we can boost even further now with Emma's support and Emma's success.
If she was struggling to grasp the scale of her achievement, spotting herself on a giant New York billboard this morning must have helped. And as long as she keeps winning and smiling that smile, there will be plenty more where that came from. Steve Scott, ITV News.
We're staying in the States, and Britney Spears has announced she's engaged to her long-term boyfriend, Sam Asghari. She posted a video with the ring on Instagram. It comes less than a week after her father, Jamie Spears, filed to end the conservatorship she has been under for the past 13 years. The singer previously told a court its conditions did not allow her to marry. And finally tonight, as any marathon runner will tell you, when you get near the end, you really feel every last yard. But when participants in last weekend's Brighton Marathon crossed the line, they had good reason to feel pretty tired because due to an unfortunate error, the course was a third of a mile too long. And as Dan Rivers explains, it's not the first marathon mistake.
For many, it is the ultimate physical challenge, but for marathon runners in Brighton yesterday, it was just that little bit harder. Not because of the heat, but because cones were put in the wrong place along the course, meaning it was actually too long. How much? Well, this gives you a sense of the extra distance the runners had to endure, almost a third of a mile further. Given that every single step at the end of any marathon is a personal, mental and physical battle, the extra 568 metres up this last straight must have been agonising. Ryan Gaylor, who ran the 26.5 miles in a spandex Elvis costume, is now even more proud of his achievement.
26 miles, you know, that's about the limit, but to have to run the final 500 was a challenge. I was certainly rocking and rolling through those final yards.
It's not the first time marathons haven't quite measured up. The separately organised Brighton Half was 146 metres short for 3 years. The Greater Manchester Marathon measured around 380 metres under for 3 consecutive events. And in Belfast, 460 metres was accidentally added to the course in 2019. Today, the organisers of the Brighton Marathon were embarrassed and apologetic, but just glad to have had any event after overcoming pandemic delays and staff shortages.
The achievement is far greater than worrying about the little blip of the distance.
And they're all ultra-marathon runners?
They're all now ultra-marathon runners, yes, but we will make sure it's 26.2 miles in future.
Everyone who finished yesterday can rest assured not only they went the distance, but they also went just that little bit further. Dan Rivers, ITV News, Brighton.
And that is all for now. Raggy will be here with news at 10, but from me and all the team here, bye-bye.